Shalom. I was very unsure if I should make this video or not, but the primary project of everything I do, in fact, is something like Shalom, is sense making. And this recent uh, news item, I have a link in the description. I'm not going to play the video. It is worth watching. And it is worth watching with the preamble that I am going to give. There are many people I respect very much who think that when Jordan Peterson speaks about the danger we are in, he is exaggerating. And there are many people who think that I am too ready and willing to warn of dangers which may not exist. And I acknowledge that may be a problem. But the fact is, Barbara F. Walter, former CIA analyst and a UC San Diego professor of political science, her appearance on PBS public broadcasting system channel with Hari Srinivasan, who is an anchor for PBS NewsHour, is serious. It's very, very serious. If we have not already started having a civil war, we are definitely on the brink of it. There is a rise in anti-Semitism, and yes, Jews are the canaries in the coal mine in this regard. Anybody who seriously studies political science should recognize that the essential facts of what Barbara Walter says in her interview are in fact correct. Civil wars are started exclusively by men. They happen when you do not have a strong democracy. And please, for the love of God, do not confuse a strong democracy with a majoritarian democracy. A democracy in which 51% of the population, or even worse, 50% plus one of the population consistently dominates the other 49 point however many % of the population, that is not a strong democracy. That is a tyranny of the majority. And the indications that she brings up as far as the possibility for civil war in the United States and the likelihood of civil war in the United States is real. She is absolutely right about that. And the people who are most likely to be engaging in that violent war will almost exclusively be men. That's just how wars work. And they will be young men. And guess what? Most of them are going to be white, because that is still the plurality, at least, of our population. This is upsetting, and it should be upsetting. And you need to actually, relevance realization is important. And while I do and will continue to focus on things which are higher and more important than the day-to-day politics of the United States. We are, in fact, in a situation where we are factionalizing around racial lines. That is dangerous, where large numbers of our population do not feel that our elections are being held fairly and openly. And I cannot stress how stupid it was for Hari Srinivasan and Barbara Walter in their discussion to pretend that suppressing the people who want to demonstrate outside outside voting booths armed would somehow improve the situation, as opposed to allowing them to feel heard. You get violence when people feel that they have no capacity to be politically involved. If politics is the alternative to violence, and if you tell someone that they will not be allowed to demonstrate, to speak, to vote, and have a genuine voice in the political process, and that genuine voice does not mean that 51% or even 60% or even 70% or even 80% of the population gets to dominate the other 20%. Guess what happens when 20% of the population, especially if it is a regional concentration of the population, feels that they cannot be sovereign in their region because 80% of the population disagrees with them? That is when you get separatist movements. So if we are serious about averting the civil war that we are actually looking at, we need to start strengthening the regional, federalism, subsidiarian representation. And, for example, the filibuster, we need to go back to the filibuster. We need to strengthen the Electoral College, not abolish it. Majoritarian democracy is not a strong democracy. That's not how democracy works. That's not how political science works. If you have not watched the interview, I highly recommend that you do. If you think that we are not anywhere, that there is no possibility of a civil war in the United States, you need to watch this interview. If you do not appreciate that, as wrong as this woman seems to be, I mean, she actually seems to not be, either she doesn't understand the import of her words, or she is trying to sell a lot of books. What she is saying is not wrong, but the way she says it seems to be, in fact, trying to stoke violence. We need to be inclusive in our democracy, and that does not mean that you try to bring more people into the democracy. It means you take the polity that we have, and you try to help everyone in that polity feel part of the larger group, to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel that their concerns are in fact being met, the only way out of this crisis, and it is an actual political crisis that we are definitely heading towards, is to reduce the factionalism, to enforce the rule of law for everyone, to allow people to voice their concerns. There's going to be a lot of chances for discussion, and back to our scheduled programming of discussions of religion and what are in fact more important matters. But part of the reason that on this channel we are dealing with the more important matters is because our political system is incredibly broken. That's my motivation for having these discussions. That's my motivation for trying to strengthen our religious cohesion, our communities, who we are, our distributed cognition, and our relevance realization. But part of that relevance realization has to be, must be, an understanding that in fact we are headed towards civil war. And if you doubt that, please watch the interview that's linked in the description. Please pay more attention to Barbara Walter and I probably disagree on everything in terms of politics. But she is absolutely right. We are headed towards civil war. And if you care about this country, about people, about peace and goodness and God, you have to recognize that we are in a situation that is not like anything we have experienced in the past 50 years in this country. I can say quite definitively, we have not been this close to civil war in the past 50 years. And it sounds like I am being alarmist and Chicken Little, but I am not an alarmist, and I am not the type of person who runs around saying the sky is falling. We are headed towards civil war, and it's not just me saying this, it's people who have studied what goes on in societies, including me. This was a focus of study for me for many years. And look, if it's not enough for you that a professor of political science from one of the top universities in this country is writing a book about it and being interviewed on PBS about it, and people like Jordan Peterson who are not, he's not an alarmist. I am opposed to alarmism. I am opposed to um, crying wolf, because at some point you need to cry wolf, and we need to cry wolf right now, because there is a wolf. We are in fact looking at civil war. If you want to discuss this, we can in the comments. Obviously, there will be just chatting streams. Not sure Father Eric wants to talk about this in his just chatting stream coming up after my interview with Lee Baker. But I will be having just chatting streams, which will probably be focusing more on the things I usually talk about. But indeed, I did make the decision that I do need to talk about this in particular, because relevance realization is incredibly important. And if we are going to have secured cognition, we need to recognize that we are, in fact, at a crisis point. And it doesn't have to be eschatological, but if you want, we can, in fact, talk on a we can, in fact, talk on an eschatological frame, but ultimately, this is very real. We are, in fact, looking at civil war. And Krish, I didn't answer your other questions because they weren't on topic. This is, unfortunately, globalization has meant also globalization of political instability, but definitely I am talking mostly in the United States. The United States is looking at increasing political violence, and our political leaders are not, in fact, spending the time to do what it takes in actually strengthening our democracy, in order to avoid it. And the first thing you have to remember in trying to make sure, no, it's not just because of Biden, but Biden is contributing to it. Some people would argue Trump was contributing to it. I don't think he was. I think, in fact, Trump was improving the situation by giving voice to a lot of things which needed to be given voice to. But what the most important thing to remember is 60% of the people dominating 40% of the people is a recipe for civil war. It is not a functioning democracy. 60% of the people dominating 40% of the people is a recipe for civil war, and ultimately you have to understand that the purpose of government, of politics, is to avert violence, and the people who commit violence are men, overwhelmingly men. So when it comes down to it, when you look at the situation, if you have a electorate where 60% of the population is voting one way and 40% of the population is voting another way, and that 40% is overwhelmingly female, that will not end you with a civil war. if the 40% minority is overwhelmingly male, you will very definitely end up not only with a civil war, but you will lose the civil war. Wars are fought by men. If you cannot understand this, then you're just too dumb for me to talk to. On that note, shalom.